This episode is proudly supported by Pepe Sayer Australian Cultured Butter.
The Pepe Sayer all new Australian butter sheets. Everything we've learned over the last 12 years, we've put into making this new butter sheet. Combined with a brand spanking new shiny machine from Switzerland, we're able now to produce this beautiful butter sheet that's so easy to laminate with. So it's pliable, it's very fresh. If you're an Australian baker buying our butter sheets, they're made weekly. The formulation, it's a beautiful unsalted butter that will work for savoury and sweet. I think it's a perfect balance there. The bakers and pastry chefs that are using it are just raving about it.
For more information, go to pepesayer.com.au.
I couldn't imagine myself doing anything else. I often think about what else would I do if I wasn't in the kitchen. I honestly just draw a blank every time. So that's probably going to be something that I'll keep doing until my body says no.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. A long life in food is one thing, but being an integral part of the success and longevity of an establishment is another thing altogether. As Tasmania's incredible Stillwater restaurant and 7 rooms hotel celebrates 25 years this year, today we catch up with Craig Will, the co-owner and executive chef. Craig, how are you?
Yeah, good, Hucky. How are you?
I'm good, mate. It's pretty incredible for any venue to last 25 years. How are things at the moment?
Yeah, actually not too bad. We've had a good summer and autumn's shaping up to be pretty good as well. Lots of tourists around at the moment, so, all positive.
Launceston's a pretty beautiful part of Tasmania. You've been a big part of the food scene there for quite a while now. Tell us a little bit about the city and the food offering and where it's at the moment.
Yeah, sure. So Launceston sort of sits in the north of the state, and we're surrounded by a lot of the growing regions of the state, a lot of farming, vegetables, cropping, meat, dairy, all that kind of stuff. So we're sort of situated quite close to a lot of where we get our food and source a lot of our food from. The city itself is about 90,000 people. I think it's Australia's third oldest city for memory. So lots of old buildings, and you walk through the city. There's a lot of heritage here, and they actually planned and mapped Melbourne, one of the local pubs here that a lot of people probably don't know about. So that's the old Battenham and Faulkner down in town, where all that was decided. So we've got a lot of heritage in this place, so that's attractive for tourists to come to the area and check it out. And where we're situated, it's on the tributary of 2 rivers coming into the Tamar, so the south and north Esk, and an old flour mill.
You've had a long career in food, and a lot of it with Stillwater and Black Cow Bistro, which we'll get into in a little while. How much have you seen food and restaurants change in Launceston over sort of your career?
Yeah, so I obviously grew up in Launceston and left school in grade 11 to pursue a career in cookery. And that was in the late 90s, and couldn't really get a job locally. Not to say that there wasn't a restaurant scene, there was actually a pretty good restaurant scene, but ended up getting an apprenticeship down in Hobart. But over the years, we've had lots of really good restaurants in Launceston, and they've sort of come and gone over the time I've been here. I sort of moved back in 2008, and during that time, the food scene in Launceston was probably outpacing Hobart. So lots of restaurants and fine dining restaurants and good chefs in the area. And over the course of the last 17 years, I've been here now back. And they've sort of come and gone, and new ones have started. Food trends have come and gone, but Stillwater have always worked towards one formula, and that seems to have worked for us.
You mentioned that you grew up in Launceston. Take us back to when you were young. You've had a long sort of life in food, even well before you decided to become a chef. Tell us about growing up and the connection that you had with food from a young age.
Yeah, sure. So grew up in suburban Launceston. Dad had a pharmacy, ran his own business, only 5-minute walk from home. So we had a large backyard. So we were spoilt for fruit trees and nut trees and vegetables. He was an avid grower of veggies, and around this time of the year, maybe a few weeks ago, would be into full swing pickling and relish season. So I would help my dad out do all that, and then would have preserves throughout the year. I was given my own patch of a vegetable patch to grow my own sort of veggies, so I sort of experimented around and grew different vegetables and whatnot. But it was more sort of like the fruit and nut trees that I used to like making jams and preserves, and my grandmother's old walnut cake recipe, which used to make all the time. Me and my brother used to love making sweet treats, so we'd always be making cakes and biscuits and slices and all that kind of thing to sort of fuel our sugar obsession, I suppose, being kids. So that was always fun. So we did a lot of cooking together, but it was sort of like in high school, I suppose, where I got my sort of passion for cooking. We had a really good home economics teacher back then. She was actually an ex-chef. So she knew the industry, really well and described it in detail and sort of sparked my curiosity, I suppose, to the industry and started, buying cookbooks and looking into famous chefs of the time. And as it turned out, my older cousin, he's 9 years older than me, was already a chef in Hobart. So also got to sort of see it from his point of view, what the industry was like. So I spent a lot of time down there talking to him and then sort of throughout school, did food technology and ended up being the only male in the class a lot of the time and finished that in year 11 and then went off into the big wide world to look for an apprenticeship in cookery. So I sort of sent letters out and went and, door dropped and all that kind of thing that you'd normally do trying to find a job, and ended up working for Dad for about a year because I couldn't find a job, and I had a kitchen hand job as well at 2 restaurants back then. So 3 jobs in total. And it wasn't, yeah. So it wasn't until, so it was late 1999, I got a phone call from this executive chef at the Grand Chancellor in Hobart offering me a position. So I went down, checked it out, packed all my stuff up, and a week later I moved down there. And I was 17 at the time. And did my course for the apprenticeship there over 4 years, and it's actually a really good spot to sort of learn back then because it was a large-scale hotel. It was about 50 chefs with about 12 apprentices there, and they had all the different sections that you could learn in, cold ladle, hot buffet, a la carte, pastry, butchery, functions, and they also had a fine dining restaurant there called Means. It's now a function space, I think. But I spent majority of my time there, 3 years in total. So we were sort of left to our own devices and were able to create and do whatever dishes we wanted to, and didn't really have any constraints. And as it turns out, after about 2 years of working there, my older cousin actually got the chef de partie job in that particular restaurant. So I got to work with him for about a year and a half. So that was pretty cool.
What was life like for you as a 17-year-old moving south to Hobart? Were there challenges with the sort of the move?
Not really. I sort of got into a share house. My older brother was already living down there. I got into a share house with a few of his friends. So they sort of looked after me. They treated me like their little brother and made sure that I was okay and all that kind of stuff. So that was good to have kind of like family around. So and I just knuckled down and just worked. For about 4 years, I don't think I took any annual leave because you're young and you're full of energy and you just don't really need holidays at that point. And I eventually moved out of that house into another house with a few friends, chef friends. So it was like 4 of us, all working sort of in the same industry. So we'd all reconvene at the house each night, and it became known as a bit of a party house. There was a party there most nights. You'd rock up some nights, you wouldn't even know half the people there. So, I was loving the hospitality industry at that point, and it was doing everything that I wanted to do. It was, by nature, I'm sort of like a reclusive kind of person, but that sort of brought out the other side of me. Being in that situation, I suppose. But that's ultimately why I enjoy working. Back of house in kitchens, being in the dark, I suppose.
A little while ago, you mentioned that just very briefly that you left the island for a period of your career. Tell us about where you went and where you sunk your teeth into your career off the island.
Yeah, so I met my now wife at the Grand Chancellor. She was a apprentice too. She started about 6 months after me. So she spent most of her time in the pastry kitchen, and she wanted to specialise in pastries. And she worked with a few of the pastry chefs there, and they mentioned this TAFE in South Australia in Adelaide that which is probably the best in the country, should go there. So we checked it out, and she applied, and we packed up all our stuff and moved to Adelaide in about 2003, I think it was. And so we got there, and she hadn't actually been accepted. It was actually like one of those schools that sort of, is quite prestigious and only take a certain intake each year. So, but she got accepted. We found a place to live down in Glenelg Beach, and there's a promenade there of lots of restaurants. So I just dropped my resume at all those restaurants and got a call back from one of them, and went down and had a chat to the chef there, and ended up working there for a few years. It was called Salt. I'm not too sure if it's still there, but they had a sister restaurant called Fish. It was basically fish and chips. So after about 6 months, I got promoted to sous chef. At that point, it was quite a bit different working in a fast-paced bistro as opposed to a hotel fine diner with doing sort of 350 covers in a service as opposed to 60. So it was quite high pace, and that sort of obviously taught me a lot working in that environment. And the opportunity to work at Fish, because the guy that owned it also had ownership of Adelaide Fish Market. So they used to bring all their fish in the round, basically, and we had a fishmonger working on site, breaking down all these fish. So got to learn quite, a new skill there, how to process fish and oysters and scallops and all that kind of thing, and then obviously cook it all. So that was quite a great experience to do all that, and I actually really loved Adelaide. I was looking at real estate there for a place to buy, but sort of the itch came, and my wife wanted to move back to Hobart to be near her family. She's from a large family. She's got 4 sisters, so quite a big network of family down there. And I proposed before we left, and we moved back to Hobart and got married and bought our first home. And ended up working in a restaurant there called Mark IV for a chef called Paul Foreman. He's still down there somewhere, but Mark IV's not. And ended up working there for about 2.5 years as his second chef. So that was a great experience. Learned a lot from him.
What was it like for you coming back to Hobart with sort of new skills? Were you a different chef, and what was that period of time like?
Yeah, I definitely a different chef. I mean, like, I went from hotel to fast-paced bistro back to like a fine diner, I suppose you could call it. And working at Mark IV had its challenges too. Working with that level of food was a first for me, and working those hours was also a first for me because they were long hours. We did lunch and dinner service. They were called splits, but basically it was enough time to sort of walk back to Battery Point and get my car and bring it closer to work. So working long hours. Monica, my wife, was a pastry chef starting at 5 in the morning at a local patisserie. So we're working opposite ends of the day, and sort of like that 2 years was a bit of a blur. But, Mark IV taught me a lot about, discipline and management and cookery and, obviously blending flavours and cuisines and all that kind of stuff. So I learnt a lot in a short tenure there before the phone rang. So it was a different coming back to Hobart. Obviously, people have changed, and friends have moved on, and it's not quite the same as it was. So that was also part of the reason why we kind of decided to leave after that. So
you just said an interesting little comment before the phone rang. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so just one day out of the blue, obviously the phone rang, and on the other end was a bloke called Rod Asquith, and he said he was the owner of Stillwater in Launceston, and how he has an opportunity to open up a second restaurant, but they don't want to burden the risk themselves. They want to bring some fresh blood in, and they're on the hunt for a chef. So he knows my brother. They play golf together and that kind of thing. My brother mentioned to him that, one day, I'd like to own my own restaurant. Anyway, so Rod says, come up and we'll pitch the idea to you. So he came up, met him and his business partner, Don, and their wives. And the pitch was opening up a steak restaurant in the CBD in, filling enough an old butchery, which had been, an old butchery back in the early 1900s. So went down, had a look. It was already a restaurant at that point. It had been fitted out really well and had everything we needed. We just needed to go in and slap a bit of paint and a bit of brandy on it, and you're away. So I sort of went back home and thought about it, spoke to my wife about it, and we made the decision that this is never going to happen again in our lifetime. It's kind of like winning the lottery, getting mentorship from industry veterans. So we decided to move up, sold our house. That sort of funded us into the Black Cow. and moved up. Like I was a month later. I quit my job and I was there a month later. So Monica stayed in Hobart and got the house ready for sale and sold it, moved up as well. So that's when the Black Cow started, and that's when I first met James. As you mentioned earlier, he's been on this podcast before, and his partner Bianca. So we sort of went into the Black Cow, there's 4 partners there. So I was the chef, and James Bianca was the front of house, and Rod and Don were sort of like in the background, kind of, mentoring us through the way. So the Black Cow turned out to be, runaway success. I don't think there was ever a night we did single digits. It was always busy from the moment we opened the doors. And it's still going strong now. Yeah, we sold it, a bit over 2 years ago. And the former employees bought it off us. They'd been working there for some time. The chef there, he came to me as an apprentice. He came to Australia from Bhutan as a refugee. So when he came to me, he didn't really speak much English. But over the time, he learned how to speak English. He learned how to cook. He learned how to run business, and he bought investment properties and leveraged all that to come up with the money to buy the Black Cow, and along with the other 2 guys. So that's still going strong today. So it's great to see the legacy's living on. And sort of after about a year and a half of Black Cow, we got obviously another opportunity to get into Stillwater. So
Take us back to Black Cow first. What was it like sort of owning your own business and being invested personally that way? Did you feel different in the kitchen and different about your food and the creations?
I always said to myself that, I wasn't going to be a head chef until I was at least 30. Like I was 24 at the time. I just wanted to gain as much experience as possible before we moved up to start Black Cow. My wife and I were looking at moving. We're going to rent our house out and just start going overseas and gaining experience, but that never happened. But I suppose at that point in time, because we had the sort of the older partners involved, they sort of took care of the whole business side of things. Obviously we were still involved heavily, but my main focus was cooking, basically, building a team, and producing food that's going to appeal to a wide range of audience, so we can also make a success of it. And building a team in a little place like Launceston's has its challenges too. So I've spent many years at Stillwater doing that. So, but it was a great learning experience, I suppose. Once again, working long hours, trading 6 days a week at that point, and it was just me and one apprentice at the time, and we had a kitchen hand as well, so it was just the 3 of us. And we're doing at the time 60, 70 cover nights, and we we're just doing everything ourselves. The menu was basic, we had about 4 or 5 different meat cuts, 5 entrees, and about 4 desserts. But we made everything in house, so all the breads and pastries, everything was made in house. So we were working long, long days. And as it turns out, the apprentice that was working there with me at the time, his name's Tyler. He's back working for me again, so sort of full circle as well. So it was a great experience, and loved every minute of it. And we obviously we're trying to put roots down ourselves here, and we had a daughter in the first year as well. So she was born in the midst of all the chaos, really. So yeah.
Black Cow Bistro was a real celebration of local producers as well. Is there any that really stand out from that period of time that you celebrated on the menu?
Yeah, I mean, I think one that always sticks to my mind is probably Rom's Island Wagyu. The owner, one of the owners, John Hammond himself, came and saw me one day. We're actually in the process of cutting down this massive eucalyptus tree in the front yard of Stillwater that became a public hazard. So this thing was one of the biggest in the city. So we're standing there watching this thing get cut down out in the park. And this guy just approached me, and he had an esky. He goes, "Oh, you're Craig?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "My name's John." And, he explained the story and the whole ethos of what they were trying to do. And he had all these steaks in his esky, and he said, "Take these and give them a try and let me know what you think." So I rang him a week later and said, "It's fantastic. I've never had sort of local Wagyu that good before." He invited me down to his farm, and we did the whole sort of drive over on cars across the sandbar to Robbins Island and checked out the whole operation of what they're doing. Just thought it was fantastic, and been in contact ever since. And it's been on the menu ever since, and it's still on the menu. So that's one that sort of really sticks in my mind, along with all the beef down the northwest coast of Tasmania. It's just phenomenal, like Cape Grim and that kind of thing. So been down there numerous times and done tours and talked to farmers and celebrated Tasmanian beef. We've never used any other beef apart from Tasmanian on the menu, and it's still like that today. The guys are still flying that flag high.
Take us back to that trip with John. What is it about what he does on the farm and the Wagyu that makes it so special for you as a cook?
So back then it was grass fed only. So the cleanest air in the world down Cape Grim. That's scientifically proven. So obviously that's got something to do with it. The pristine sort of pastures of Robbins Island as well. The cattle are free to roam the entire island. They go to the beach and go into the water and eat all the coastal succulents and all the other sort of stuff they can get access to. So, and then they bring them back to the mainland across the sandbar at low tide. There's been heaps of videos and stuff done of it over the years, of bringing the herd back. And then they stayed on pasture there for upwards of 3 years, I think it was, before they'd go to slaughter. But then, Robbins Island became quite successful and demand went quite high. So they decided to start putting them onto grain. So that's what they did. So sort of to speed up the process, I suppose. But I don't think the quality suffered at all. It probably even got better once they got onto a bit of grain. But it's just such a beautiful part of the world. It's like 4 hours from where we live here, and on the map you look at it, it's like how it doesn't look that far, but it is. But you get down there, it's like you're in a different part of the world down there. It's just amazing, breathtaking, really. So that's always stuck in my mind as how special that is.
What was it like for you trying to balance Black Cow Bistro and Stillwater once you sort of became part of that crew as well?
I suppose processes become easier with economies of scale. We had a large team. Once again, our partners sort of looked after the financials and the running of the business. I focused on the menu and the food and building the team. So I suppose I had good help as well. I brought back some of the former chefs of Stillwater once we got in there. So they all sort of came back on and knew the place pretty well and knew how to run the kitchen. So we sort of renovated it within the first 6 months. We just completely gutted it and started fresh. And rebrand it at the same time, just give it new look of ownership and whatnot, and came up with a whole new menu, different style of food, everything from what it used to be. I was already a 10-year established restaurant at that point, and this was 2010. So we took it in a whole new direction, and it worked reasonably well. We were trading breakfast, lunch, and dinner at that point. 7 days a week for breakfast, lunch, and 6 for dinner. So it was a busy place to be. But the place ran well, and sort of over the course of a few years, things changed, and we're sort of in a different situation now, I suppose.
Yeah, it's evolved quite a bit since that period of time, and obviously we had the blip of COVID, which sort of affects every sort of business and the way that they continued afterwards. What's the model like now with Stillwater? Tell us a bit about what you're doing.
So COVID kind of came and just changed everything for us. At that point, we had decided to add on 7 boutique hotel rooms to the business, where we sit in the flower mill. The restaurant occupies the bottom floor, and above it you got 2 more floors. At that point, we were running like a little providore giftware shop and a gallery, which didn't really do much for us, and we thought that hotel could probably do more for us and bring more customers in. So my business partner Rod at the time, he owns the building, so he developed it, and we started the business together and ended up calling it 7, after 7 rooms, I suppose. And then we were trading for about a year. It was going really well. We'd brought a new partner in to run the hotel, and COVID came and just completely put a stop to everything we were doing, literally overnight. And it was doom and gloom back then. I was in the midst of building a house, didn't know if it was going to be finished or not. Luckily it did. But, we had to stand down all our staff and, had to divvy up all the food that was in the place and, get rid of it all because we didn't know what was going on. We just kept what was in the freezer. And then obviously, they allowed us to do takeaway, and that put us into a new phase as to what we're doing. We're using JobKeeper to obviously keep all the staff employed, and probably one of the biggest successes was the black cow takeaway at the time. Sort of everybody was doing everything they could to keep things moving. So like our meat suppliers were selling meat to us a lot heavily discounted as to what they were. So we were able to put together this little like meal box with like an eye fillet, potato galette, which we served with every steak, vegetables and a sauce for $40. And these things were a runaway success. They were flying out there like hotcakes. We also did steak sandwich and we did desserts and entrees and stuff. And it got to a point where, we're doing a couple of hundred meals a day. And we did delivery as well. So we're delivering in all the areas of Launceston. Our employers were using their cars. They were just happy to be out and about doing something. Also, it was pick up as well. So, it got to the point where we were, doing massive numbers in the restaurant again in a short time. And, that kept going. Like once we were allowed to reopen, that the takeaway kept going for, a couple of years after that. And not too sure if the guys are still doing it now. Probably not. But, it became so popular that people just kept requesting it and asking for it. So it sort of makes you think, it's obviously a business you can almost go into one day because people still like takeaways as much as going out. So that was always on the back of the mind. So, but as far as Stillwater is concerned, that was also busy with the whole takeaway scenario. And we were allowed to reopen. We sort of changed our menu a bit and changed what we're doing. Obviously, some staff had gone over that time, so down a few people. So, sort of remodeled into the way it is today. The menu's sort of the way it is today after what happened through COVID as well. So, we're not doing breakfast anymore, obviously. That sort of came and went over the COVID years, and we sort of couldn't find it profitable anymore, so we had to sort of close that down. So now we do sort of hampers in the room, I suppose, like for breakfast for people staying, locally baked croissants and fruit and yogurts and that kind of thing. So, it's a lot different to what it used to be.
Tell us a little bit about your food. Is there a dish or two that you can tell us about that's on the menu that sort of exemplifies what you're doing at Stillwater?
Yeah, we don't really hang on to dishes for too long. Sort of, have a formula that stays the same. But like as far as dishes are concerned, there's nothing that really sticks on the menu for too long. But one of my favourites is probably a simple dish of rock lobster that we cook on site, and we pick all the meat out, and we make like a macadamia nut cream that's smoked, and use that to bind the lobster together. And it's served on freshly cooked rye blinis. That's encompassing local ingredients such as lobster and rye grown in Tasmania, and macadamia nuts from obviously not Tasmania, but lends itself really well with the sweetness of the lobster. So I've always had lobster on the menu as well, just in different incarnations. That always is there. It's a staple, along with lots of other sort of local ingredients. But like, I suppose my favourite types of cuisine are Japanese and French, and I sort of marry those two together quite well. I love Japanese flavours. Love all the umami sort of notes that they bring. And then the classic, technique of French cooking is just staple with what we're doing.
You mentioned it's been a couple of years now since you let go of Black Cow Bistro. Was that a hard thing to do?
Yeah, it was a tough decision. Obviously, we wanted to sort of have more family time. I've got two daughters now, so they're actually teenagers now. So I've missed a lot of their sort of childhood and growing up. I'm going to spend a bit more time with them now in their teenage years, and I suppose freeing ourselves up time wise and whatnot was sort of key decision into selling Black Cow. And luckily, my business partners were on the same page. They have a small family too, so they were keen to spend more time with their young family. So it sort of became mutual. we sort of looked around for a buyer. I went onto the open market, and then I remember one day one of the guys that bought it, Ethan, so three of them bought it, Ethan, Tom and Nabin. Ethan came up to me and goes, "Oh, would you let me buy it?" I'm like, "Yeah." And sort of went from there, and they went and gathered the funds and put an offer in, and we accepted. So, I'm just glad that it's still going strong, and the menu has remained virtually the same. They've sort of grown on the wines and whatnot, and they're it's our legacy living on. It's so great to see that they're still doing it. And I go there regularly for dinner, and it's still just as good as it was when we had it. So it's good to see.
At the top of the show, we mentioned Bianca and James Welsh, who are your business partners and have been for quite a long time now. What's it like working with both of them?
I mean, we all started, around the same age. I think there's about a year that separates me and James in age, and 2 with Bianca. So we're all around the same point in life. Looking to get married. Well, I was already married. They were looking to get married, and we're young and eager, and all had the same values and drive. And we've never really deviated from that. We've never really had any sort of disagreement, or it's been 17 years. Not many business partnerships last for that long, and it's remained the same all the way through. And just as much time and effort's put into the business by everyone, and it's just works successfully, I suppose. And we're still got the same values now and the same vision, and we're working well on it. So, yeah.
25 years is pretty amazing for a venue. You've been a big part of that. What's sort of the plans for the next sort of 2 to 5 years with Stillwater?
So obviously we're going to have a bit of a shindig this year for the 25-year anniversary, and we're also being part of Dark Mofo this year, which is a festival in Hobart, which is put on by Mona. So we've been the host restaurant for the guest chef that's coming over. So that's gonna be a whole new experience. As far as the next few years are concerned, we've got plans to expand on the hotel. We're in a big old building, and it's got a big grain size next to it, and they just sit there empty. So I've always had our eyes on that, going, what can we do there? So growing the sort of accommodation style part of the business would be, first and foremost, I would think. Obviously, trying to build a young team in the restaurant for us to eventually hand the reins over would be part of a plan as well. So we've been growing that team for many years. But yeah, obviously spending time with my daughters and wife would be my number one priority in life at the moment, and just keeping Stillwater busy and ticking over, and and kicking goals, which it constantly does.
Well, it's incredible what you guys continue to do there in Launceston. Craig, what do you love about what you do?
I've always loved cooking. Like I said, back when I was a child, mum and dad both worked, and my brother and I would get dinners ready and make sweet treats. So, I've always, had a natural ability for it. I couldn't imagine myself doing anything else. Like, I often think about what else would I do if I wasn't in the kitchen. I honestly just draw a blank every time. So it's probably going to be something that I'll keep doing until my body says no. So it's just about, keeping yourself fit mentally and physically, I suppose, so I can keep doing it. And I still do, 3 to 4 nights a week in the kitchen, purely because I love it. I probably could get to a point where I don't have to, but I just always drawn back to it. So, for me personally, it's just a real love affair with the restaurant and hospitality industry. And if I wasn't doing it, I'd be a bit lost, I suppose. So I just enjoy it that much.
Well, congratulations on 25 years, and an honour to have you on Deep in the Weeds today to hear a part of your story. Keep in touch, and we'll catch up again soon.
Yeah, most definitely. Thanks very much for having me.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we take a deep dive into the lives of the incredible people who ply their trade in the food and hospitality sector. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds Podcast, or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay safe and be well.